In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern where we have very major storm systems moving across the nation. These will bring blizzard conditions likely to portions of the plains, upper Midwest. This is, especially the first one, going to be a very intense low pressure system, even historic potentially, as I've seen some models flirting with this being some of the lowest pressure we've seen this time of year pretty much ever for this region of the nation. It's more comparable to a category 2 or 3 hurricane really than a plains low pressure system. So to see this in early to mid-March is absolutely insane. There will be one after it that is also quite hefty, not nearly record breaking by any means, but it's very, very strong for this time of year. Pretty unusual. So back to back major systems, warm temperatures prevailing in the east, cold in the west, snow in the west and northern plains and Midwest, like we mentioned, and then more severe weather and thunderstorm activity in the east, unless you're in areas that are very mountainous in the northeast or you're very close to those Great Lakes and up near Canada. Other than that, you're likely not dealing with too much in the way of snowfall here throughout the upcoming weeks. And for that matter, we're pretty much lowering the possibility at all after we reach kind of the late March portion for the eastern states. So I'm going to be surprised if we see anything in the way of major snowfall for the rest of this snow season in these parts. So before we dive into things, be sure to check out my most recent vlog. I am filming new stuff for the upcoming one and ones after it. I really want to improve my vlogs overall, so be sure to check it out. We had a massive snowstorm, a foot of snowfall. We played with the dog in it. She absolutely loved it. We also saw a windstorm come through, so it is semi-weather related. I think it might be too weather related at certain points. I think I'm a little bit more interested in the weather than most other people are, but there is some life stuff in there. Also, we're starting our garden, which is going to be a big part of the vlog moving forward. It overall was a well edited and pretty entertaining vlog in my opinion. I'd love to get you guys' feedback though, because I do want to improve the vlog channel as much as possible. So if you have thoughts, leave it down below here, or what would be even more helpful is if you watched the vlog and then commented it there for the algorithm. That helps me out so much. Also, just liking those videos and leaving a comment. I already mentioned that, and then subscribing to that channel, as I really do have big plans for it. And of course, it doesn't take anything away from this channel. I just have extra time that I'm dedicating to that. So rest assured that this channel isn't going to be affected at all by that one. You can check it out in the description, pinned comment, and the top right corner of your screen. I appreciate you guys so much. You guys have supported that so much, and I can't thank you guys enough. And let's just go ahead and dive into the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here. And we do have March 15th through 19th here. The temperatures we see below normal temperatures out west. We call this a negative PNA. I feel like I start every video out like this because it's just a glaring feature that we have going, and really it just means cold in the west, and that's gonna in turn basically force the warmth to move into the central portions, as you can see, but especially these eastern portions where we expect highly above normal temperatures during this time frame. I should also mention, I forgot to mention this in the beginning of the video, but we do have some extended range storm prediction center outlooks for, I think, day 6 and 7. It might be day 5 and 6. But that is going to be associated with that very major, almost historic, if not literally historic storm there in the plains. And that is going to bring severe weather to parts of the southern plains, some of the Midwest, and into the deeper south. And I think that it could even extend into the southeastern states for that day 7 or 8 time frame. So we're going to be diving into that a little bit later on as well. Let's take a look at the precipitation during this time frame, and we could see still above normal precipitation expected throughout much of the west here. Also, this does extend up into the Midwest and northern plains and Great Lakes, as a lot of our lows are going to be moving through here. What we will see happen around this portion is cold fronts begin to develop, and that brings storms throughout these areas that start to turn green here in the deeper south. And oftentimes, and especially with this stronger low, what we're going to see is a secondary low develop underneath, which is very common. I mean, this one is going to be in the 970s or 980s up here. So we will likely see a low pressure system form down here in the 990s, a secondary low, and that is only going to enhance the precipitation for these overall areas. So we really expect a lot of activity in the east as well due to these major western storms that are coming through. The only area we expect below average precipitation is here in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and a couple of counties there in southern Kansas. but really wet throughout most of the nation. The 8 to 14 day outlook here, we do see that the temperatures are still expected to be below normal here in western portions of the United States, and this again is going to continue to force a lot of warmth here into parts of the central states, but again, still especially the eastern states, they're dealing with some pretty highly above normal temperatures. As we just dive into the precipitation during this time frame, it's a little bit more uncertain. They're not going with the deeper shades at all here, so take it with a grain of salt. I think whenever they use these lighter colors, the confidence is a bit lower, but we do expect overall wetter conditions for portions of the west, portions of the east here as well. So it is similar to that 6 to 10 day outlook. I don't think I mentioned this, but this is for the 17th through 23rd, and so was the past temperature map as well, by the way. We do see below average precipitation still for the south central portion, very similar areas, and then a bit of Florida maybe as well. But again, when they use these lighter shades, we can look at the bottom right here. I mean, we're only at like 33 to 40% confidence in this lightest shade, and the second one is just below a 50-50 chance. So yeah, there is a good chance that we're very close to normal, and maybe quite a bit of this maybe swings the other way. This is a little bit more of an uncertain time frame. I will show this one more time. I show this for the days following typically that they issue these, but this came out Friday. This is the 3 to 4 week temperature outlook, and this goes from March 22nd through April 4th. So this gives us a good vision into the long range from that climate prediction center, which they always do an excellent job typically. I do disagree sometimes, and I'll always let you guys know when I do, but really just warmth prevailing here in the central and eastern states, which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise with really the near term looking this way and the medium term, and now the long range leaning this way. If we get to April 4th in these above normal temperatures, you're really looking at a time frame where even if we return back to average or slightly below average, it's going to be a lot warmer than our below average days are now in early to mid-March. So we're kind of gliding through this very early springtime, which typically can look pretty wintry, in an above normal pattern, and that's why I really just feel like we're just gonna see an overall early spring. It feels like an early spring. It feels like we're already in April, especially. It's a little cooler. It has been for a couple of days here, but in the coming days, early next week, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, into that following weekend, I think a lot of folks are going to see 60s, 70s, and even 80s for some of the further south areas. So it is going to start to really feel like spring in a big way. Probably a lot of you are going to have to break out the lawnmower, which, call me crazy, but this time of year I'm always looking forward to. Like the first mow, I can't wait to do it. I don't know what it is. I just love it. And then, by the fourth, fifth, sixth time, I'm absolutely dreading it. So that's kind of how that works for me. But I think that we're going to see a lot of this early. It's going to feel like April here throughout a lot of March, and maybe April will feel like May, or maybe April will feel like April, or maybe I'm hoping not, but maybe April will feel like March and we'll just be flipped. We really don't know much about April yet, obviously, as we're still in early March, but we will know more later on. Let's take a look at the precipitation as well for this 3 to 4 week outlook, and we can see the Northwest, parts of the Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and Northeast in this above normal precipitation category, and the below normal for the South Central. This is one that I've had a little bit of a gripe with. I feel like this is just a basic La Nina precipitation map, and we've seen this from the Climate Prediction Center and the National Weather Service throughout the winter. I got a good comment yesterday, which was basically like, why is the Climate Prediction Center always calling for above normal precipitation in the Northeast, yet we've had below average basically the whole winter, and there's been wildfires and stuff, and it's just super dry. I really feel like they've been, since the fall time, maybe even we've been calling for a La Nina, I guess, since like the spring, I think, of 2024. So we really have had this bias, and I say we, but it's really them. I feel like I've been calling for a neutral ENSO for a long time, since before the winter. I always felt like this La Nina was overblown. The National Weather Service chose to kind of lean into it, which there was a lot of guidance to support that, so it wasn't necessarily a bad idea. They just kind of stuck with it. They didn't give up on it. And still to this day, I'm looking at these and it just looks like a La Nina. So I think this is more based on the fact that they're kind of feeling like we're in more of a La Nina pattern than we are. And I feel like this is why these long range precipitation maps have been quite a bit off, especially for areas like the Northeast, where typically in a La Nina, these areas would be above average precipitation, but it hasn't panned out that way for everybody. And I think that that's why we've lost accuracy towards the tail end. And also the Northwest. I know the West has been above average overall, but it hasn't just been the Northwest like a La Nina would have. It's really been just like the whole Western seaboard. And a lot of the winter was not that way, which is unusual for a La Nina. The only thing that I kind of agree with is this south central dry area, just because we've been locked into a pattern like that. I really feel like that might continue. But really, this is, again, just a basic La Nina precipitation map, and it could absolutely be right, but I've seen them do this throughout the winter, and it has been wrong, as mentioned from that commenter up in the Northeast, quite a few times here. So I just wanted to kind of break that down for you guys. Here's the past 10 days, so this does include the final day of February, but the first 9 days of March as well, and really, it's a toss-up. We have warm temperatures throughout most of the states, starting with the Cascades and Rockies, really. I mean, there's at near normal conditions for the West, and for the far Southwest we're a little bit below normal, but that's the only area in the lower 48 where we've seen that. The warmest area is east of these Rockies, maybe including them and east of them, into the plains, parts of the Midwest here, and then again the Rockies and just to the east of them. And then the east is another area that's just like the West, where it's been kind of a toss-up. But we know, looking at those previous outlooks, that we are going to see this warm push here for weeks to come, so you can expect that this is going to get more yellow and eventually orange and maybe even red for a lot of these areas over the coming days. So we'll see how it evolves together. Here's the European model. Both of them agree on the very major storm coming up in about 6 or 7 days. And again, the Storm Prediction Center does have outlooks issued already in the long range, which is very similar to what we saw with our previous severe weather event. I think it was like March 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So yeah, bad sign when you see them issuing outlooks that far out, because they don't always do it. They sometimes wait until it's within 3 days, but when they do it at like the 6, 7, 8 day mark, typically that means bad things are to come, which with a low in the 970s, 960s, with a very strong cold front moving into a very warm area, it's just a recipe for severe weather, really. So it couldn't be more obvious, really. We do have thunderstorms today throughout the deep south, and mostly we're seeing it on this eastern end. This is from well, this says 2 p.m. It's 3:20 right now. So we're seeing something like this. I know we do have, I think, a severe weather watch somewhere here in the deeper south as well, with some thunderstorms popping off. So it is a pretty active thunderstorm day down there in the deep south. I'm sure for those of you watching from there would agree. As we just move towards tomorrow afternoon, what we see is this does develop into a low offshore of the southeast. We continue to see thunderstorms in the southeast corridor, maybe a little less intense than they are today on Sunday the 9th, but still a thunderstorm threat will prevail. This low right here will have no push up the east coast, really. We can tell that the wind is pretty much just moving almost southeasterly, if anything, but directly east, if not. And that is going to basically force this low to develop, and then it's going to really, really quickly just want to slide off the east. So let's watch that play out overnight Monday to Tuesday. We do see that it wants to push up the east coast, but it's just fighting those winds, and it just ends up losing and pushing straight off the east coast, which is basically how that storm has looked for a long time. Wednesday the 12th, though, is when we start to see activity pushing on from the Pacific into the west coast, and we're seeing some low pressure. I mean, we have a 989 here just to the east of the Sierra Nevada mountains. We have it's really hard to see, but I think it's like a 995 or 94 there over some of the Canadian Rockies. So we have a lot of broad low pressure in here, and this is bringing mountainous snowfall and lower elevation in coastal areas, really heavy rainfall. So again, the whole West really seeing a pretty far above average precipitation pattern coming up. By the time we reach Thursday afternoon, we see that this only worsens. We see cold air actually get drawn in as your stronger low pressure is now to the east of this area. That basically is, it has a dry cold front in a way, dry warm front here. So you can imagine that cold air is getting pulled down the west coast. This is switching over even more areas over to snowfall. So think in the beginning, the very high elevations had snowfall, and you're moving down a couple thousand feet with where is seeing snowfall at this point, maybe even more than that. So as that cold air gets drawn in, more and more areas start to see snowfall here. But still, for the extreme low elevations and the extreme coastal areas, only rainfall, obviously, as these western storms tend to be. As we keep going, I want to take us straight towards Friday, which will be the 14th, and this is when things start to get going. 977 here over eastern Colorado and western Kansas. If I'm correct, I think that the upper 970s would be nowhere near historic. It's mostly if we were at like 970 or into the 960s where we would be talking in historic terms, which we still have some models saying yesterday. We literally saw the GFS model show that. So these models have been flirting with potentially historic territory for this low. Does that mean we will see historic impacts from it? Absolutely not. I've always preached that the pressure of the system doesn't directly affect the intensity of the outcome and the effects. It does lean that way. Obviously, if you see an extremely low pressure, you expect more on the extreme side of impacts, but I have seen less impactful strong systems and more impactful weak systems, so it's not always true. And we are seeing with a low this strong, we see these black lines and red lines are super close together. We are seeing really strong winds is what that basically means. We're seeing heavy snowfall in there, and already we might be seeing blizzard conditions in some of these areas like Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico. It's really tough to say, but if it looked this way, it's very possible already. And that's not even the main area that I'm watching for. We don't have any thunderstorms off to the east of it, but just watch this area. We're going to move overnight Friday into Saturday, and you're going to see just stuff start to really pop up here overnight. So let's just go a couple of hours. Right here, this is only 8 p.m. on Friday. Here is 11 p.m. And then here is 2 a.m. And suddenly we have thunderstorms and severe weather just going crazy here, especially in the Midwest, but down into some of the deeper south like eastern Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, even areas like Arkansas and Tennessee, which I would not consider the Midwest, obviously. But all of these areas seeing really violent thunderstorms already overnight Friday into Saturday. And definitely any heavy snowfall that happens in here likely would be associated with intense winds, and that's going to bring the possibility for blizzards. Yesterday, there was a huge misconception. People thought I was calling for blizzards in the eastern states. But if you listen 10 seconds into my video, I think I've mentioned this almost every day, but I really don't expect much in the way of snowfall in the eastern states, let alone blizzard conditions. So if you just look at the thumbnail, if you just look at the title and comment, that's your own problem. That's your own choice, because clearly it's really hard to get across all the information on the thumbnail and title, and it's very easy to misunderstand. The real content, the real things that I'm calling for are within the video, and obviously that is fair game to comment on. But the thumbnail and title, I'm very limited to a single image and a certain amount of characters. I obviously cannot give you a full-blown forecast of what to expect. So I really don't recommend at all trying to get accurate information from just the thumbnail and title. That's a bad idea. With that being said, let's keep going. Towards the afternoon of Saturday, and we see that this is 970. I can't tell if it's 970 or 979. Either way, very strong. And we see a lot of mixing, freezing rain in here. If this leans more snowfall, there's intense winds in here. This would also be another time frame Saturday afternoon where we could be having blizzard conditions. The potential is sky high, and oftentimes we do see in this area, springtime or fall, like very late fall, very early spring. I feel like we tend to have these very intense snowstorms or even blizzards up there in these upper Midwest and northern plains areas. So wouldn't surprise me at all, especially when we're dealing with a very abnormally intense low pressure system. We can see that the cold front is pretty extended out here. It's almost outpacing the low, and that's going to be the theme here. The warm front is way up to the north, so we are getting warm air just flying northward into the Great Lakes here, up into the northeast, and everywhere in between, everywhere underneath it. So we have this ripe environment in this area, and likely thunderstorms pretty widespread throughout this entire area by Saturday the 15th. And the further into the spring we go, the more common this type of thing is going to be, these widespread just thunderstorm chances. And I think that is what this day looks like, better yet, I should say. These areas look to be the most consistent with the precipitation, so likely the highest chance of seeing thunderstorms. And again, our primary low is here, and here's that secondary low, 998. So that's what we mentioned at the beginning of the video. This really enhances a lot of the precipitation in that area, and we see that taking effect here Saturday afternoon. As we keep going towards Sunday afternoon, this will be 2 p.m. on Sunday the 16th. This low is weakening, and it's over the Hudson Bay, 981. So the further away that gets from our area, the less that's even playing a role. But we still have this violent cold front, and it's reaching all the way from that southern Hudson Bay all the way down to almost the Yucatan Peninsula there. So that is a long stretching cold front, and it's going to bring thunderstorms offshore in the Gulf Florida, offshore of the southeast, for the southeast coast, mid-Atlantic areas, probably up into the northeast in Canada. Really intense, large line of thunderstorms, it looks like, for Saturday into Sunday. Really interesting stuff. And I think Sunday the 16th is the date that we do not have an extended day outlook, but you could imagine that there will be, to some extent, at least a thunderstorm chance, if not, marginal, maybe even slight risk in these areas, maybe more, who knows. But that's going to be like day 7 or 8 here, so that is very far out. Likely don't expect to see anything for the 16th for a day or two, or maybe even more. They might just wait for the, within 3-day range. We'll have to wait and see. Meanwhile, we do have another storm system moving on shore of the west, and this is bringing, once again, pretty widespread snowfall throughout these mountain ranges, a lot of rainfall for the coastal areas, just another very intense western storm, which makes sense. We're expecting above normal precipitation. This all adds up, really. When we move towards Monday afternoon, that first storm has moved out. We do have some snow showers up here in the Midwest. Guess I'll mention that. Could be a very weak clipper system. We don't have a true low pressure system over the west, but we do have snowfall for the mountains still, some rainfall there for the more coastal areas once again. I want to take us straight into Tuesday the 18th, and again, it's a little quieter for this day. Some showery activity happening here in the mid-Atlantic and parts of the Northeast, but nothing major at all. I mean, you might see some mixed precipitation or snowfall in there, but again, it's very weak, so nothing notable as of now for that. We do look at the southwest and we see continued snowfall and rainfall down there, and that is a little bit more vibrant, I would say. By Wednesday afternoon, this one races from the southwest over across the Four Corner States into Oklahoma, Kansas area here as a 996. So this is nowhere near that 977 that we saw before it, but that really creates a standard that's unrealistic. 996 is a well enough intense storm to create major impacts, as we mentioned earlier. So don't take this one lightly either. We're seeing major snowfall throughout the Rockies and parts of the plains, and already seeing thunderstorms developing out ahead of this low, as they tend to do. Warm front stretching out over the Midwest and Great Lakes. This looks like it could be another pretty intense setup. So interestingly, we look at this frame. This is a really good weather lesson here, actually. Wednesday at 8 p.m., 995 here over Oklahoma, 1,000 millibar here over Ohio. What we're going to see between the next couple frames is almost all that energy is going to transfer to that low that's upstream, which is really interesting. So this one's going to become a much weaker low and even dissipate, and this one's going to intensify rapidly. We do see this happen from time to time, so watch this play out. I mean, we'll start it from the beginning. So we get our low from Colorado. We move through into the afternoon of Wednesday the 19th, and look at this. Then that low over Ohio, it takes over suddenly. Now this one's 1,003. This one's a 991. So that transfer happens like within 6 hours or 12 hours here. 991 here near Lake Erie. Clearly a dragging cold front. This one's very different than the ones before it, because the other ones were outpacing it and kind of bowed out. This one's dragging behind. Pretty interesting. Can bring a plethora of different types of impacts. We'll have to wait and see, and once we work out the finer details. But we have this warm front out to the east as well, so we see that warm air is racing once again behind that warm front up this southeastern corridor. So right before these cold fronts come through, expect the warmest days in the upcoming pattern as well, as that warm front is just funneling that warm air up. It almost has like a suction where it sucks it up. So be on the lookout for that. There is some wintry weather behind this cold front. It is limited and pretty mixed down here in the plains and Midwest. It's once you move up to the Great Lakes in Canada, where it looks like we could have some pure snow to the north of that primary low. So watch out for that. We're already seeing thunderstorms developing here along this cold front area. This is 2 a.m. on Thursday the 20th. By the time we reach the afternoon of it's Thursday the 20th. So by the time we reach the afternoon of Thursday, we see this low lowers all the way down to a 982, just to the north of the Northeast. Still, we have a dragging cold front. And again, this will present itself as a thunderstorm risk for a lot of these areas. Even some snowfall in the back end for parts of Ohio and Pennsylvania as of now, but this is beyond 10 days out, so take it with a grain of salt, seriously. As we move overnight, this is actually 8 p.m. We see that a lot of this thunderstorm activity is moving eastward. Some snowfall there for the mountains of West Virginia, if it's this cold. And we see that one eventually moves out. We get quieter for the days following, like the 21st, 22nd, 23rd here. And And really, yeah, as we reach the end of the model run, we're not getting anything too crazy going, although we're getting another West Coast storm system. So you could imagine the trend. We'll probably see this one make it out to the plains again and probably see it move up in a similar fashion and probably see thunderstorms and severe weather underneath. It's hard to say for certain, but if we're locked into a pattern of this, seriously, this could be a common trend here. So that is a safe assumption that if we see more storms moving onto the west, they might take a similar track. It's the best guess at this point. We do see actually a kind of like isolated and scattered about thunderstorm event happening throughout the plains for this Monday date. And maybe this low or this low is about to take off before this one even arrives. But time will tell. Probably going to look a lot different by tomorrow because this is hours 360. Let's take a look here at the GFS model as well, and as we just kind of work our way through it, we see this southeast storm. I'm going to glance at this. We always just kind of do. But we get this storm system here, 971, so it is close to the 960 still. This is still the more intense of the two models. And we get these blizzard conditions perhaps for the plains, between the plains and Rockies there. Heavy snowfall regardless, if it doesn't reach legitimately blizzard conditions. And we see the thunderstorms just pop off between Friday and Saturday. This is 11 p.m. Friday, really intense thunderstorms again in the Midwest and down through the deep South, just to start things out. And as we keep going, the secondary low develops, and this one is much more driven by the secondary low, because this low just gets kind of like detached. That cold front gets cut off, and we're really seeing this one take over with this dragging cold front. And I know it's confusing, but it won't change the impacts too much. We see this one move up, and it's its own respectable low. 989, the secondary low, develops the cold front here, and we're seeing likely severe weather in there Sunday morning, and by the time we're reaching Sunday afternoon, this low is all the way up in eastern Canada, and we're seeing likely thunderstorms and severe weather all the way up the southeast coast, all the way up the mid-Atlantic, and maybe even into the northeast, just like we saw in the European model. It happens in a different way, but it still happens on both, so again, it won't change the outcome too much. You wouldn't notice the difference if you couldn't look at this map, really. If you were just, watching it outside, it wouldn't make too big of a difference, probably. As we take a look at the snowfall here for the Cascades, the Rockies, the Sierra Nevada, we're seeing this next storm coming in, just like the European model showed. That one moves east of the Rockies. And similarly, I mean, we end up with this low here over Pennsylvania, New York, dragging cold front instead of that extended one with some snowfall behind that cold front. So pretty similar, like I mentioned. That cold front moves through, brings some thunderstorms and severe weather likely. A little bit of a southern mid-Atlantic snowfall event. Very outlandish, honestly. Could happen, of course. Anything's possible in weather. That's my famous saying. But at hours 288, it's the GFS model. It tends to just want to do crazy stuff at this range. So we kind of, whenever we see something like this, we seriously take it with a grain of salt. If it looks normal and if the European model agrees, then that's when you start to put some, confidence in it. But when it's just on an island by itself, calling for some weird stuff, yeah, little rough there. We do see a low near Chicago, actually, and there's probably some thunderstorms underneath this. I'd imagine if we actually saw a low like this, we'd have a little bit more of a cold front going on, especially we see a drier warm front here. So we're getting the same effect, the funneling warm air up the east, cold air hitting it from the side, but just low precipitation in this case. I suspect if we saw something like this, it's a big if, it would be a little higher precipitation. But time will tell, of course. Here's the total precipitation, actually. And as we look at the west, we see a ton, just a ton out there. And then for a lot of the east, we're seeing a very decent amount. Even the northeast, for those commenters up there, it looks like we're going to get a pretty good amount. But for a lot of areas, it's not going to amount to actually above average precipitation. But if it really has been super dry, slightly below average precipitation is probably more than you've seen over the winter, so it's still going to be a good thing and an increase versus what you've been seeing. And I mean, we're decent. This is pretty neutral, honestly, throughout this entire area. Some greens, some lighter browns, but very close to normal in almost every case. So good news there. The west doing phenomenal as far as precipitation, and it's mostly these central areas where we're seeing the most below. Let's take a look at the total snowfall. And again, the east, it's going to be really hard to come by snowfall. The west is just getting buried in feet of snowfall. Springtime and fall time are oftentimes really good for them, so it makes sense. And, we see plowable snowfall for a lot of the Midwest and northern plains. It's very important to always remember that a blizzard does not mean, feet of snowfall. All it means is very heavy snowfall with very strong winds combined to create basically whiteout conditions. That is a blizzard. So Even if you get 6 inches, even if you get 10, it can be a blizzard. Even if you get 2 inches, it could be a very brief blizzard, probably. Who knows? So it's more about a visibility thing in intensity of snowfall coming down than it is about total amounts of snow. But really, this is a decent snow system. I mean, 6 to 10 inches and even 10 to 12 in some of those areas. It's not a small snowstorm. I know that they can get feet and feet and feet up here from some storms. It doesn't look like this is that, though. The Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, I mean, while these models do show a couple of inches in some areas, it's important to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, when I move this back to, let's see, I want to see. So all of this happens after hours 240. This is where we're at Monday the 17th, over a week from now, and there's practically nothing unless you're in the mountainous northeast in these eastern areas. So all of it's happening after hours 200. That's when you kind of know you got to take it with a grain of salt. GFS model, I mean, same thing. We get quite a bit here in the northeast. We get quite a bit in that lower mid-Atlantic, but even this one, when I move it back to hours 200, practically nothing. So obviously, the further out it is, the less likely on the models, of course. And it's also important to note that the further we go into March, the less climate, like according to climate, it is likely. So we're really fighting two different battles here to get snowfall at the longer range end of these models. So I'm pretty skeptical, and I think you should be too. But things can obviously go differently. We'll have to wait and see. Let's take a look at the temperature pattern, because we're going to see an overall warming trend here. Again, we're pretty cool throughout a lot of the east here, but we're warming up by Monday here, very warm. Tuesday, very warm. Wednesday, a brief cool down for the northeast, but for Thursday here, Friday, very warm. This is incredibly warm up here for these areas. A lot of those browns is where we're looking at 15 to 25 degrees above normal. The almost whites or tans in there is where we're like 20 to 30 degrees above normal. And then those where it starts to turn back into like a salmon color here for like Minnesota, Iowa, parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, even northern Missouri there. That is 30 to unlimited degrees above normal. We're seeing a maximum of 37.3 in here. It's likely somewhere in this corridor here. But yeah, that is insanely above normal temperatures. And we can see the below normal temperatures out west. Again, that's that negative PNA, which is really violently forcing the warm air to move up into these parts. So the west is driving the pattern at this point. As we keep going, we will see that cold front come through for the 16th, 17th, 18th. We pretty much ricochet back into a warmer pattern pretty briefly, though. It's going to be for the 19th, 20th, 21st. We get another cool down here for the 21st, 22nd, 23rd. And then it looks like we're about to warm back up again. But the majority of this model run is warm. Let's take a look quickly at the Storm Prediction Center outlooks. This is the day one outlook, where we have a general thunderstorm risk here throughout a lot of the deeper south and southeast. A marginal risk there for a lot of southern Alabama, southern Georgia, into Florida. That's basically where we expect isolated severe weather to occur. The lighter green, we don't expect severe weather, but anything is possible. So heat every watch, warning, and advisory. But thunderstorms are very possible throughout the light green. Day two, again, we do have a chance of general thunderstorms throughout a lot of these areas with that low that develops offshore, but a little bit less of a chance of severe, well, pretty significant lesser chance of severe weather for this day two, as that low is offshore, probably just general thunderstorms. Day three, no activity expected, so we get a little break here. But by day six, again, another long range issued probabilistic convective outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. This is for Friday the 14th into the morning of Saturday the 15th. We're watching for the Midwest, some of the deeper south as well, to see potential severe weather. And this translates roughly to a slight risk of severe weather at least. So that means pretty probable that we see at least an enhanced risk in there somewhere, maybe even more, like a moderate or, God forbid, a high. So whenever we see a day six outlook, again, oftentimes they don't even do this. These are called extended day outlooks, the day 4 through 8 outlooks. Typically, they wait until the day 1, 2, or 3 to issue these. But when you see them issue it days in advance of it being within that categorical outlook, that's when you know they're really eyeballing something potentially major. And I think this is exactly that. So again, that roughly translates to at least a slight risk in the yellow. Here's the day 7 outlook, where things kind of translate into more of a deeper south threat. Still, at least translates to a slight risk. We see a lot of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and the Florida Panhandle in this. And again, we don't have anything for day 8, but I suspect that we could see a threat for parts of the southeast areas, whether that's general thunderstorm, whether that's marginal, whether that's slight. It remains unknown, but I think that this will extend even into Sunday the 16th for these southeast areas, at least, maybe up into the mid-Atlantic or even the northeast, but we'll have to wait and see. With all that being said, that's it for this video, guys. Be sure to subscribe for more daily weather videos just like this one. You can even hit the bell icon so that you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.